Facebook has actually had a lot of time and a lot of experience focusing on this insider threat, mostly because for Facebook it was a bit of a PR problem. Most of the public breaches that we had to talk about were when some engineer would look at the information of his ex-girlfriend's new boyfriend, or those sort of privacy breaches. And so it forced the company to build a lot of tooling around observing patterns in what engineers and others, what sort of data you access or whose data you access. So we've built various alerting systems to tell us if you access data that's 2 degrees removed from you or certain things like this. We look for patterns that at the time was mostly to prevent engineers from doing something stupid or something that they shouldn't. Basically firing offenses at Facebook, things that will get you just bounced straight out the door, no questions asked, and it's those sort of data access patterns. And so we had to build this technology before we really thought about applying it to an actual intentional insider, or the case situations where an insider would accidentally download malware, and then that would be used as the exploitation vector for infiltrating the org and trying to move laterally.
So policies alone weren't enough. You had to have a technical solution to deal with this as well.
Absolutely. I mean, engineers and others will follow the rules, but when it becomes personal, sometimes the rules get bent for people. So it gave us a great incentive to actually build this sort of infrastructure. And then it turns out that was a very useful tool for us to have when we were facing nation-state actors and APTs. Once they get into the organization, it makes it very difficult for them to pivot to the sort of information they actually want to access, because then it looks like an engineer trying to access information that they shouldn't necessarily be looking at. So it turns out that it was alerting systems and monitoring infrastructure built for one purpose had an added benefit that turned out to be a major advantage when dealing with some of the the very sophisticated threats that we were facing.
And how do you think that other organizations can use that insight that you've just given us to improve their own internal and external security?
Well, for a lot of it, at least looking at the internal security, is noticing that an insider attack is not necessarily an intentional attack. It doesn't mean that somebody's been paid off. A lot of times it just means someone was sloppy, or they went to a site that they shouldn't have, or clicked on a link that they shouldn't have, or that they were provided with equipment that wasn't properly protected. And so they just happened to be the person who was unlucky enough to get hit by the 0-day for a particular email that they opened, doing the proper thing but not knowing it. So part of it is building up the internal culture that doesn't assign blame to these sort of activities. I mean, there are certain things that you can say this is intentional, and obviously this is a breach of your employment agreement, but there's a lot of activity that is also just somebody doesn't know exactly what they're doing, or the fact that it's not something they should be doing. So again, it's a culture problem, and building within people this idea of internalizing the organization's goals and their own goals, and making sure that they're all, the incentives are aligned, so that the person who's sitting there at their laptop doing their normal daily work is thinking about security, not just about protecting the organization, but about protecting their own information and their own interests.